Hi, everyone. My name is Sierra Yates. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm based out of Chicago. I'm a brand comms manager at Pinterest, and I'm also the VP of communications for our Black employee resource group, Blackboard. It's been a pleasure to introduce two incredible women with us today, Carissa Valencia, creator and showrunner, and Yelda Ali, artist, activist, and author. We'll be chatting about everything from their multifaceted creative journeys to how they use their activism to empower and break down barriers for their communities. Let's talk about Carissa. Carissa is a California native, literally. She grew up between San Diego and Santa Ynez Chumash Reservation. While her Mexican family taught her how to make tamales, her Chumash family took her to powwows and traditional ceremonies every year. With a foot in both cultures, she's constantly inspired as a writer. The Chumash tribe supported her Hollywood dreams and generously provided a full-ride scholarship to the schools of her choice. Studying English and creative writing at the University of San Diego, and then pursued a graduate degree in television and film at Syracuse University. Carissa's animation career began at Nickelodeon, where she worked as a production assistant for Dora and Friends, writing for preschool favorites such as Disney's Junior and Dr. McStuffins. She is currently a showrunner and executive producer of Netflix animation upcoming preschool series Spirit Rangers, which follows the fantastical adventures of a modern-day Native American family. And then Yelda, an Afghan refugee born in Germany, raised in Canada, and settled in New York, published poet, Yelda has dedicated her life to building and organizing communities around the world. Bridging the gap between cultures by creating safe spaces for marginalized voices, Yelda's work reminds us of the values of community, empathy, and compassion. Smuggled out of war-torn Afghanistan in her mother's womb, her auspicious entrance into life has been driven by her purpose. Having grown up poring over books of Persian poets Hafez and Mevlana, Ali's first poem, Our Children, was published when she was just 11 years old. Today, Yelda uses her voice and platform to create a diasporic art and tell stories that represent those who remain voiceless. From founding of women's safety organization, Camel Assembly, to also earning her certificate as a mental health crisis aide, Yelda's compass points towards creating compassionate enclaves for those who need it most. Let's just take a second. Wow. Two amazing bios there, amazing women. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you both today. I'll kind of pass it to you, Yelda, to give you the floor, just to tell us a little bit about, what's inspiring you right now today and just like who you are.
My name is Yelda Ali, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. And who I am, I love this question. It's so much better than what you do. I am a sister and daughter. I am a believer. I am a storyteller. I care about women's safety. I care about mental health. I love reading and writing. And what am I inspired by? Kids, for sure, are very inspiring to me. Right now, I just came off of a trip spending time with my nieces and nephew, and man, they're really cool. So my environment, my culture, music, handmade art, exhibitions, seeing what other creatives are doing. I'm sort of feeding off of all of that.
Hello, so my name is Carissa Valencia. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am currently based in Los Angeles. So I love this question. It's so fun, and I like thinking about it that way. Who I am as a person, like you, Yelda, we have so many similarities. I'm so happy to be doing this panel with you. I'm a big sister. I love my little sisters. I love my family. I'm a storyteller. I'm an artist. I'm a huge nerd. I love animation. I love superheroes and fantasy. And I am a dog mom. So if you hear a little chihuahua in the background, that is her. So I apologize in advance.
Amazing. Thank you both for sharing. I love the fact that both of you have connection through children. And Chris, I know you've written and produced for the coolest children's shows. And Yelda, you're not only just the founder of a women's safety org, but you're also a DJ. So taking on such creative projects, especially during a pandemic, must have been kind of challenging, to say the least. What would you say is like a typical day for both of you?
Sure. So, a typical day for me, currently, I'm all work from home, currently remote. So, I'm here in Los Angeles, show running. And it's crazy to be doing this in a pandemic when the world's on fire, and making cartoons is kind of hard sometimes when it's like, how do I make something funny when everything going on around me is really rough? And thinking about like the kids and what they're growing up in right now is like a lot to take in. But I am so passionate about my job. I love my show. I think it deserves a place on TV amongst all the TV shows that are out there. So my typical day is essentially I have all my dream jobs at the same time. So I'm a writer by trade and pitched Spirit Rangers to Netflix. Which was just my own idea. But now that the show is bought, I oversee several aspects of production. So my full day is virtual, but I'm all over the world traveling, like I'm meeting Zoom meetings in New York, chatting with my composers, recording our cast all over the country in like South Dakota, New Mexico, Oregon, everywhere. And then I meet with my writers every day, reading their scripts, hashing out stories. And my art team is all the way in Paris and France. So when I connect with them, we're chatting art, reviewing animatics, and looking at designs. And it's amazing to be flexing this creativity muscle across all different areas of storytelling, because I am started out just writing, but now I absolutely love seeing the whole process come together, and like, how does this color impact this character, and how does this delivery impact that character? It's been so fun. So yeah, my day's all over the world in a way, even though I'm just at home in my office.
That's like the beauty of what I guess the pandemic brought, was realizing you could travel right out of your, I guess, house.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I would say I don't have a typical day.
I love that.
I could be honestly DJing at like 11 p.m. till 1 in the morning, or I could be taking a meeting at 9 a.m. In a different city. So either way, however it looks, I'm having my coffee and I'm having a smoothie. That's very typical for me to get those two things in. And I'd say a third thing is that I love to get either like a phone call in or a FaceTime with my mom every day. Definitely a priority of mine. And then I would say my days, they're really community focused. And also naturally, I have a really nice co-working space in my home. So I see multiple people in my community every day, which I'm sure isn't normal for everyone. But I not only take walks around my neighborhood and know a lot of my neighbors because I've invested in my community here, but also I host a lot of people in my home. And so, I'd say that it's pretty typical that I see 2 to 3 to 5 friends a day. And where I can be flexible, I usually like to give myself the mornings, and then I work late into the night. And, usually around 3 p.m. is when I really get going.
I love that. So cool. Okay, so it's so great to hear about both of you and your backgrounds and how you explore yourselves as creatives. And I'm wondering, like, just to set the ground here in the beginning of this talk, like, how do you both identify? And what does identity mean to you, and how do you show up in your identity?
How do I connect to my identity? I can't say that, it's always been a part of me that I've connected and embraced all parts of me. It was more of an unraveling. It's all part of me today, my identity, but it's because I put that time and dedication into things. So, for example, I always wrote poems and short stories. And then I started DJing. And then I started organizing and mobilizing communities around causes I cared about. And then I started creating spaces around mental health. in between all of those things that made me realize this is a part of me. I care about these things because whether I've experienced them or they're part of my, maybe bloodline, I started also doing a lot of things in between that weren't part of me. And I think that's such an important part of the journey, is that it's not like, oh, yeah, DJing and New York are parts of my identity. No, but I did dedicate enough time and tears into these things for now me to be able to identify with them. So I think it's important that, like, we also remember that, like, we create our identity. It's not just something in the past.
So you speak to possessing a foot in two cultures, which I think is so cool and interesting, both Mexican and native. I'm sure the folks at home in the audience can relate to being both and multiple layers of themselves. So how has identity played a role in your story, and how has it taught you about the importance of intersectionality?
For me, I guess just like the nuts and bolts, my identity, half my family is Mexican and the other half is Shumash. So that has been, my culture has just been a big piece of my identity and something I've walked and explored and also not explored. I took a long time just kind of pushing both of those aside and assimilating and, blending in, I would say. Like Yelda was saying, I think I'm exploring new pieces of my own identity, but my favorite has actually been going back and learning about my ancestors' stories and hearing how their identities shaped them and what they hoped for us to be today. And that has really channeled into my storytelling currently with Spirit Rangers, because it embraces all types of traditional stories. So I'm just having a ball exploring all of these amazing stories that I'm hoping to bring to modern day.
Mm. I was thinking about this recently, about, like, whose voice has been lent to me? Which ancestor? Is this the first time they're speaking English? It is interesting to think about what's also just, been passed on.
Yeah.
Question for both of you. So, like, how would you say that I hear both of you are talking about being creative and like having different routines and talking to people and engaging with people from like all over the world, right? So, can you talk to me a little bit about maybe how your culture and identity is kind of interweaved within your creative passions and like how that manifests in your day to day with like work and personal, and how identity kind of shines through in those areas?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I wonder, Carissa, if you can relate to this, but identity and creativity, that's a fairly new intersection in my life, because I've had to spend so much of my life trying to learn how to survive and then succeed, which you have to assimilate a lot to be able to survive and succeed, right? And then I think it was probably in my late 20s, early 30s when I was fortunate enough that those weren't my motivators anymore. And I was now focused more on healing, inner child healing, all that good stuff, shadow work. And naturally, my identity started coming to the forefront. And naturally, I started exploring parts of my life that I always kept insular in my home and never brought out into my art and my community and my activism. Some things naturally happened where, whether it was injustices in America or injustices in Afghanistan across different races, that started pushing me into, why do I care about this? Why do I want to be an activist? Which was, part of my identity, coming from a lineage of not only political freedom fighters in my family, but also martyrs and people that really picked their hill and died on it. So I started realizing that parts of my identity, they didn't have to be put in like my home anymore. And if I shared those things, I would actually be able to speak to a lot of people's experiences. So I think that, there was this turn where assimilation wasn't as powerful as representation in my life anymore. And all I wanted to do was represent my truth and my life and my experiences, no matter if like people understood or not. It was more about my own healing.
That was a word. I love that. I love that. I could not agree more. What about you, Carissa?
Totally agree. And I'm so glad you brought it up so quickly and were just so willing to share because I had a similar experience. Like, I feel like it is much easier to not be a brown girl. It's just much easier to assimilate and do other things. And so half my family is Mexican and the other half is Shumash. So I feel like walking both of those identities, it has always been harder to be native for me, at least in my own personal experience. And that is something that I, growing up, like put away for a while, just like Yelda, you were saying. Like, I just hated getting the questions of like, oh, like, are you a Cherokee princess? Or like, oh, how come you have curly hair and not like straight hair? And do you live in a teepee? Like, I just got tired of, answering those questions and having to stand up for myself. And that started when I was really young. Like, Pocahontas came out. I was a 90s kid growing up on those movies, and everybody was hitting me with those questions. And while I was excited to see this like native hero on screen, despite the horrible truths of her story, it was still easier to just not talk about it. And then as I got older and was writing more and like really wanted to pursue this career of writing for television, my scripts that were really strong and came out natural were the ones where I was exploring my identity and like leaning into like the natural storytelling that my ancestors have always had. So that's when Spirit Rangers kind of came about. And now I am like native, loud and proud. And it's just like, I wish I got here sooner. And I'm just hoping like for the next generation of native kids who will have a show like Spirit Rangers and other shows out there with just native kids existing, wearing tennis shoes and not in leathers and feathers kind of thing. Like, I can't wait for that next. Their version of identity and intersectionality, what that looks like, will be so different. So I'm excited and for them.
That's powerful. It's so powerful. And like really speaking to the fact that you said you wish that you got here sooner, right? And I think Yelda just kind of talked about how like whether it was like kind of like what was happening in the world kind of like sparked this, right? Where it's like, I have to be who I am and I have to stand up for who I am and like be strong in that and be a powerful woman and walk the walk and talk the talk, right? I think a lot of women of color, we all kind of have that sort of awakening that happens, which is just so like strong and powerful. So I have a question for both of you, because I know that we talked a little bit about identity and creativity and how everything kind of comes together, and specifically just about sharing a passion for writing, right? And how it's kind of been a creative outlet, I think, for both of you to channel your identity through that. And it's such a powerful tool to document like process of emotion. And it's just like a general form of expression. So I'm curious to understand like maybe an example or share something around like allyship that you've used through like writing and something that people can use to kind of like look to guide or maybe form through like your writing.
So writing is my favorite thing in the world. I've been writing since I was little, so I loved hearing that Yelda had published poems at 11. That's so impressive. I've always found that like I was never like the loudest voice in the room or like the most gregarious kid, and I was able to really express myself through writing and just exploring different stories and characters and who I wanted to be and like becoming someone else for a little bit. It's amazing, and I just think it's such a powerful tool. So writing has led me now to a place where I feel like I'm using it as a tool to amplify the voices of Indigenous people. I think now I'm in a position where I'm on the hiring end. So now I'm hiring writers to come and bring Spirit Rangers to life, and me using that power to bring in new voices and take a chance on them and give them the stage, give them the mic, mentor them, make sure they have all the tools they need to succeed is a form of allyship that I'm super proud of that the show has been doing. And on the flip side of that, I think when I pitched Spirit Rangers, it was just a 2-page document and sent it to Netflix. And they read it and just listened to me. And I think like just really tried to understand what I was trying to say through my writing. And I thought that active listening was a form of allyship, just really hearing me out and like where I came from and why I think this show is important and what my beliefs are on representing POCs and the stories I wanted to tell. And yeah, I just think it's a tool we can use both as for action and also just reading and listening.
That's incredible work, by the way. I'm so impressed.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, writing, I love it. You know, I really do love doing it. How have I used it for allyship? You know, interestingly enough, sometimes it's just like writing my own stories and sharing them and representing like the very layered identity that an Afghan refugee has living in America. You know, sometimes I write in Shine Insight. I had, written an article about my marriage in my 20s, which was what I call modern arranged marriage. And it sort of went off in the, brown community because people don't talk about these things, especially women whose voices are, not just silenced in Afghanistan, but everywhere, because sometimes we're silenced by like cultural shame and familial expectations and stuff. So I've used writing to rebel and shine light to things. And then also, I think, to bring it back to identity, like there's different parts of identity. So I do these writing workshops with 14 to 18-year-old girls who are incarcerated. And that is something that's so close to my identity because I was a troubled teen that got into, a lot of trouble. And I can see where that came from, like a very tumultuous upbringing, coming to the West, being poor, all of these types of things. So it's really cool. I write poetry with these girls. We write, we share, we sort of have these really beautiful convos like we're having right now. And these girls are writing, they're remixing poetry that's like, hundreds of years old. They're writing rap songs. They're just incredible. So I think that, something that I always say is if you want like a map to where is the most authentic starting point for me to be an advocate to anything, take a look at your privileges and take a look at your traumas. And there is like a Venn diagram right there. That's where you can activate from this place of not just empathy, but also experience.
I love that. That's incredible. Incredible work. And I love that both of you are still doing like representative work and powerful work on the ground, just in like such different ways that are just so impactful to such important groups of people that are often just like left out of the conversation and out of consideration. So I really admire that. Yelda, not only do you lead with vulnerability, but it's so clear that the power of empathy and the connection that you cultivate. The recent injustices happening in Afghanistan are not new. What can you share with us about the work that you're doing to amplify and activate change in the Afghan community, specifically for Afghan women?
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking that question. I mean, I've been using my platform, mainly Instagram, to raise awareness to both the crisis in Afghanistan and also the refugees that are resettling in America. So there's a few nonprofits that are run by Afghan women that I have been helping raise funds towards. Again, all this information, you'll see that I'm pretty active on Instagram. So Pana Charity is founded by a woman named Roxana Benish. She's been doing incredible work. Firishta Toyib is a woman who's been helping resettle the 10,000 refugees here in New York and New Jersey. Women for Afghan Women, it's not founded by an Afghan woman, but they have been doing incredible work for Afghan women for a very long time. So I have been just helping fundraise and send money their way. I've been a connector where needed, an artist where needed. I've used my voice. Sort of staying nimble is really important when you're in this sort of marathon. And what I guess it's important to say what I've been doing is making sure I speak as an Afghan woman in the diaspora and not as an Afghan woman in Afghanistan. It's not the experience I'm living. And actually, it's been really cool for me to take the veil off of the victimization of Afghan women, because they have so many narratives that are important to be shared. Afghan women, they secured their rights to vote before women in America. Afghan women are educated and they're courageous and they're competitive. And I think it's really important to, as we start looking at the truths behind things and shining light to the truths behind things politically, it's important to also look at the narratives behind Afghan women. Why are they just these sort of victims that need to be saved? There's so much more than that. And it's been really cool for me to just share stories.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I'd like to know a little bit more about, if you could elaborate on, I know you said you're a storyteller. Could you elaborate on maybe your favorite story of a powerful Afghan woman, or something just to share with us? Because I think that that's so important, that when we have the opportunity in the stage, that we do share those good stories and challenge the notion. So I'm curious to know if you have one.
I'm so happy that you asked me this question, because I've never been asked this question. And I'm going to tell the story of my great-grandmother, actually, because she is definitely my matriarch, a very powerful woman. But, her story is crazy. She was married at the age of 13 and a widow by the age of 27. She had, 7 children. My great-grandfather was right hand to the last king of Afghanistan, and he had gotten executed when the sort of political wars started. So she raised her sons, secretly educating them. They weren't allowed to get educated. She secretly educated these 3 boys. They rose to power. They continued fighting for the freedom of Afghanistan. And that's all really cool. But what's really, really special to me is that she and the last queen of Afghanistan were the 2 women that took their scarves off to set off the liberation movement. And these are stories that are just, there's never going to be, there is no representation and documentation around these stories. These are stories that sort of only exist in our language, which is a pretty, hard language. Not many people speak our dialect of Farsi. So, it's really interesting, because I recently was sharing, we're not exotic. We're going extinct. And I'm sure you can relate to this, in that, people are othered so much, and it sort of makes it easier to justify wiping these people off the map. And right now, my people, if we're speaking about identity, being Shia and being Muslim and being Afghan, we are being literally ethnically cleansed right now, and our stories are being wiped off the map. And in fact, our stories have never even been brought over to English, which is the most valuable currency. And so it's important for me to start translating stories, and also continuing to spread my language. But yeah, thank you for asking that, and may she rest in peace. She is an amazing woman. She died at 97 years old and lived a very, very long life. Yeah.
This is a movie. You need to write this movie.
Right? That is incredible. I have chills. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's so, wow. That's amazing. Speaking of that, as a Black woman, I'm always asking, how can I be an ally, right, to all communities, and to be able to uplift, and just having just that energy of you talking about Afghan women and the stories and the rich, the history, the culture, that's so important. For me to even know. It's the first time of me hearing something like that. So that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing and giving me that knowledge. So I'm curious for the both of you. Yelda, I'll kind of kick this right back to you, but specifically, how do you see other communities becoming allies for Afghan women? And then we'll follow up with Carissa's answer after.
How to be an ally for Afghan women. You know what? I'm not even that big of a stickler for language, but I'm going to do this just for the sake of doing it. But, allyship, the definition of it has a mutual benefit in its definition. And so I love the word advocacy because it's not about mutual benefit. And what Afghans and what so many marginalized communities need is true advocacy and not just allyship, whereas if it works for me and it works for you, then we can do it. So what we just need is like in this wave, and I understand there's so many waves before you keep having more people have consciousness. In this wave, it's still educating yourselves, learning what's happening. It's really dire. Things are really bad right now in Afghanistan and also with all the displaced Afghans around the world. And, you know, I think that I personally believe in marching daily. And that for me means taking the passion of a protest and applying it to your everyday efforts. So that can be as simple as, how do I learn more? How do I donate masks? How do I donate time? How do I help Afghan refugee learn how to buy groceries? There's so many local ways that we can give back. And then that being said, you know, advocacy in general, especially with Black and Brown communities, I think I'm going to speak specifically to America. I think solidarity here, it means that we understand that the Black and Brown experience is very different. And then we also understand that they're both founded on patriarchy and capitalism and colonialism and racism. So one is having awareness. We don't need to co-opt messages. I think it's really important in this country specifically to pay homage to Black lives that have led the path for so many of us to be able to organize and mobilize. So it's very important to me always to make sure every community is finding their own message. You have your own message, and then also supporting one another financially. You know what I mean? We're in this system, so we can be more mindful about where we get our products from, you know, and finding a minority woman-owned business. It's all accessible. And so I think that is how we can sort of rise together.
So, Carissa, what about you? How do you see, and I'm going to borrow Yelda's term, which I love, how do you see more people being advocates for Native people or for the Mexican community, or even people who identify within multiple races, like biracial, multicultural, all those things? Like, how can we be better advocates for people with multiple identities and beyond?
I think it's kind of what I touched on a little bit earlier. I think the strongest tool that I've seen used is truly just listening to everyone's stories. Being a good listener with that, I think, can really lead to greater change. I guess I would say too, like, everyone can be an ally as well. I think a lot of people think that they either know everything or I don't think I can help, I can't do that. But everybody has some form of privilege, like even within like in the Indigenous community, I've done a lot of soul searching with my identity here because there are over 500 federally recognized tribes, probably another 500 that are not federally recognized. And within those communities, we are all so different. Like my tribe was able to send me to college. I got to go for a full ride because of what my reservation, where they are currently. But other reservations and other tribes do not have that same resource or backing, and they can't help their communities that way just yet. So I think kind of recognizing, like, even within my own community, that I can still be an ally and help in different ways is really helpful.
So activism and being a part of the community, obviously, we know is no small suit. I think it takes a daily dedication to becoming an activist, right? And so, Yelda, I'm curious to also know that I listened to earlier when you were talking about all the different things that you do throughout a day and your routine and friends coming over and doing all those things. I know that burnout can be very real, especially in a pandemic, as we're doing all these things from home. You know, like Chris is talking to people from Paris and beyond and all those things. I would love to know how you, Yelda, invest in rest and replenish yourself. That's like a very Pinterest internal thing that we talk about. But how do you invest in rest and avoid burnout? And what role do your network and your community play in self-care?
The hardest question yet. You know what? I would definitely say that I probably don't do enough to replenish. I love sleeping to soothe myself and process. I am that person that, like, if I'm going through a lot, I'm like, I need to go to sleep right now. And I will just sleep and soothe. And that's a way I do replenish. I had recently, like a healer tell me, you've mastered intensity. You need to learn pleasure. And so I'm on this journey right now. I'm like, pleasure? No Netflix, no chill. So I'm definitely trying to figure out outlets for myself to really rest. My community, man, they make me feel so safe and secure that is self-care to me.
I love that. And Cursa, what about you? How do you invest in self-care and rest too? Or like what things do you do in order to avoid burnout? Because I know you're doing so much.
Yeah, this is a journey I have been on because I think with everything going on in the world, plus like our passion for doing our jobs, I personally found burnout came very quickly for me. So this is a great question to be discussing because I think as women we can be too hard on ourselves sometimes. But I think to touch on burnout for a teeny bit is like I found myself burning out quickly because one, I love my job. So it's like I have all this passion to just keep working and working and working. And then you find yourself just like, oh, shoot, I just worked 16 hours today. Why didn't I spend any time for TV or doing anything for myself? And sometimes I would get in my head about like, this has to be perfect because if it's not, like, will they ever greenlight another native show again? And like, I just put the pressure on myself to keep going versus taking care of myself. I totally stole this saying from another writer's room, but they talk about getting the rep sweats, where you just start sweating over representation. Like, am I doing a good job? Am I making the community proud? And like thinking about just like all the things that could go wrong. And I think something that's really eased my mind and the rep sweat is that this is not going to be the only Native project. There are so many other Indigenous women, Latinx women just out there doing their thing. There's going to be more Native shows, so I can rest easy. I can carve out a little time for myself because this isn't going to be the only one. So that has really helped. And I think like because I'm stretched across so many different areas of production currently, and I'm like flexing all this creativity in different ways, it is hard for me to now like be creative for myself sometimes because the writing well is so thin and I've read so many scripts throughout the day. So I've actually decided to try different creative hobbies. Like when I tell you when Bridgerton came out and that soundtrack blew my mind, I decided I'm a piano player by trade. I played for like 10 years. And I was like, I'm going to pick up a new instrument. And I started learning the violin. And it has been so fun and so nerdy and amazing. But I think channeling that and like reinvigorating myself and making myself feel like, alive again and in touch with creativity is what keeps me going and avoiding burnout completely. Because stuff like that makes me so happy. So like, hearing like Yelda that you also are a DJ, like that sounds like another like amazing outlet. Just music in general.
It actually started just as that.
Yeah,
an outlet. Yeah,
That's absolutely amazing. Speaking of music, right? Like, what are you all listening to right now? Like, give me like your top 3 artists like right now that you can't stop listening to, you're obsessed with, they're of the moment. They could be timeless, but like of the moment, what are you listening to right now?
Drake is always going to be on that list for me. Okay, I'm not ashamed about it. I'm also listening to this Afghan artist. I think he's in Germany. His name is Farhot, Farhot, and he just put out this project this year called Kabul Fire 2. It's been the most inspiring project that I've heard in a really long time. I've just had it playing and playing and playing. And third, you know what? I always go back to nostalgic old music. I always play like songs from the 80s and 90s that I was a little girl listening to. So that folder goes from weird, some weird things happen in that folder.
That's great.
That's so funny. I totally feel you. My music taste is all over the place. I feel like I've been listening to so much Britney Spears lately, just with the year she's had. I've been listening to lots of Britney, which has been super fun. And then I also have this amazing colleague that I've worked with on Spirit Ranger. She's one of our composers for the show, but she's also a folk artist, Indigenous, also Asian American. She just walks so many different avenues with her identity. Her name is Ray Zaragoza. She's an amazing.
Oh my God, she's
artist.
One of my girls.
Yes. Oh my God, you know Ray.
Amazing.
I love Ray.
Yeah, she's I was amazing. Like, I wonder if she's talking about Ray. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
yeah, she's
I
amazing.
love her. I saw her live for the first time because of the pandemic. Of course, I couldn't see her live music, but I saw her recently last week, and it's just like, yes, Ray Zaragoza, the best. She's amazing. She's just like another trailblazing woman who is not afraid to talk about all of her pieces of identity, and I just like really look up to that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, that does it for today. I just want to say, like, both of you have been such an inspiration and just so powerful and amazing. And I love the work that you're doing. You know, Yelda, from you, like having writing sessions with like incarcerated young women, to Carissa, you literally doing groundbreaking work for representation with Spirit Rangers and like going to change, you know, the future for future Native people and have them represented in such a beautiful way. I think both of you are doing amazingly incredible work, and I'm just so like blown away. This has been such a wonderful, wonderful talk today. For our Pinterest folks out there listening, we definitely want to be able to shout out social. So follow Yelda. I'm going to drop the links in the chat so that you guys can follow them on Instagram. And then also give a quick shout out to Yelda, who has a book out right now. I'm going to drop the link there so that we have it. Yes, Outlet. Yes, definitely cop that. We're super excited. And thank you both so much for taking the time
Thank you.
to talk with us. I really, really appreciate you dropping the knowledge and sharing and just being here with us so that we could continue to be advocates and hear from each other's stories and just uplift one another. So thank you so much again. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having us. Oh my gosh, so great to chat.
Beautiful.
Amazing.